The next question is, what do you do about an applicant's references? Basically, how often do we contact them and so forth? And I don't always contact them. I almost never contact all of them. For instance, the clerk shovers that I alluded to. I would often, if they listed someone who's a teacher or a coach, I might call them to get some idea. But what's more important to me is when I visit with them, the impression I get, and if they're able to put those books in numerical or alphabetical order. So I often don't, in those, for those positions, call the references. But I do on any more senior positions, and especially I take care on the professional positions, and I try to, actually for someone like when I hired Kim Rutter or Sandy Wilkerson, I probably did contact all the ones they listed. Others I might choose the one that seems like they might give me the most relevant information. There is the problem there of people are getting more scared of being honest with you about employees, and a lot of companies, if they work for a corporation or something in particular, and sometimes for a larger government entity like a larger city or something like that, or a state agency, you might only get the routine name, dates they worked here, and if they're eligible for rehire, which doesn't tell you a whole lot. At least the eligible for rehire is something. However, I have found really the majority will talk willingly. It's kind of a problem when they won't. I understand that's their policy. There is, I will say, a law in Kansas which gives protection for a former employer to answer honestly questions about a former employee, even if it's negative, as long as it's based on facts. It can be based on their evaluations or any other thing you have facts or documentation for. And I'm always glad when people will do that. I will say I've always been willing to discuss honestly when I've been given as a reference somewhere. And I have found it very worthwhile, because you can get more of a feel for a person by talking to someone who's been a coworker or a supervisor. And you do get both as references, both supervisors and coworkers, as well as just friends sometimes, and those are not as useful. But I found it worthwhile to contact them, because you do get a fuller idea than just looking at their cover letter and resume or application.
I do contact the references, but I have found them less than helpful. Sorry, Roger. Because they're always very positive and very enthusiastic, and I don't know if it's just that I'm lucky at the employees that I'm hiring, but they just reinforce things that I've already thought. So I do it just in case something comes up, but really what applicant is going to give you a person that's giving you a bad reference? I don't know.
We do contact them as well, and mainly for the reasons Roger stated. Sometimes if you reach one that just confirms like date of hire, the dates that they worked there, but then another one, talks glowingly of their past performance, says, oh, hire that person, they're wonderful. So it can either, confirm what you've already thought, which is kind of reassuring anyway, or, you at least know that they work there, so they didn't lie about it.
We do contact references because I have called and had people lie on their application form, and we get calls that people have listed us as a reference and they have not worked for us. So yes, I do go ahead and go back and contact them to see what the situation is. More and more I'm actually seeing on application forms, there's a box there, may we contact this employer for reference? More and more people are checking no, which raises a question mark. So I would recommend going ahead and checking them.
The next question is, do you check out applicants online? And Ben, to start.
Okay, I looked this up and it said something like 70% of all employers check online. And I have to say that we do, but you have to approach it with caution. Because you look on Facebook or you Google someone, and I'm always happiest when I look at someone's Facebook profile and I can't see it, because that way I know that they know the value of privacy settings and they use them. And sometimes you look at Facebook and just so maybe you don't see any red flags. But you also have to be very careful, because there's a lot of pitfalls with using that, because you can't find something on their Facebook profile that you can't ask them in an interview, like their marital status, if they have an illness, are they pregnant, what are their religion or political habits, because that might color what you think of them. And if those things do prevent you from offering a position, that can perhaps later turn into a lawsuit if they find out about that. So you have to be very careful when you're using Facebook or any other social media.
I do look at Facebook, and you do have to make sure, particularly if it's someone who has a fairly common name, that you have the right person. Like Bev says, it shows whether they value privacy, if they've changed their privacy settings. It can give you an indication into the maturity level. That would be a good way. I mean, we all have opinions, but their sense of discretion, how they approach things. I am amazed at some of my library friends, what they put on their public Facebook postings. So it just gives you an insight into their psyche and how they're going to approach things, I think.
I check the last applicant, the one that I want to hire. I don't check any of the others, and it's after the interview process, and it's just to see if there's any red flags. Having said that, some of my best employees, if I looked at their Facebook pages, because my husband has access to them, I don't. I didn't give them a sense of privacy by not having access. But they're all friends with my husband, so. But if I looked at their Facebook pages with a sense of discretion, they would fail miserably. But they're my best employees. They're very outgoing, they have opinions, they're excited about things, they're passionate about things, and that shows up on their Facebook page, whether it's about politics or cats or whatever. They're passionate people, so I look at it for red flags, like they've gotten fired and it didn't mention it, or things like that. But as for their own personal opinions and how they conduct themselves, I don't think it's really quite an indication about how they're going to behave within the library.
Cats are evidently really important in Independence. And they have a cat. I have checked out applicants online by Googling them. I have not gone on Facebook looking for people. And part of that is my experience completely away from the job. If I encounter someone, let's say someone who's left a comment or is a friend of a friend on Facebook, if I go to look at them, 9 times out of 10 I can't see anything, because they've set the proper privacy settings, and that's good. I think that was a real good point Beth had. It's one I hadn't thought about, because I don't use Facebook. If they've set their privacy settings up so you can't see it, that's a good thing, because in libraries we're all about privacy and confidentiality, so that is good. But no, I have not done that on Facebook. I know a lot of people do. Maybe I should, but I have not. Our final question is, what steps do you take to overcome unconscious bias in your hiring practices? And Jeri K. will be the first responder.
So, I touched on this before, where you tend to hire people that are like you. That's just instinctual. So, some of the things I do is when the applicants come in, they don't come to me. The resumes, or we do have an application form for those that don't have a resume. They come to our cataloger. She just does most of the paperwork kind of things. And she wipes out their names because names give you a bias. You can tell by a surname sometimes what ethnicity they are. She wipes out place names so that I don't know if they're coming from in-state or out-state, because you can have a bias there. Anything that would really, really tell you something about them. Oh, if they have something that mentions a church, she wipes out the name of the church, because you can have a bias towards your own church versus another church. Just anything that's like that we just automatically wipe out on the resume before I ever get it. So that helps me with unconscious bias. And then the other thing is, when I'm sitting there and I'm interviewing people, I'm gut checking myself. So I'm writing things down, and when I look at that, I'm like, why did I write that down? Did I write down that I thought they were lazy? Well, what made me think that? Is it because they're not wearing clothes that I think is appropriate? But is it appropriate for the interview? Is it appropriate for their level in life? Because, you know, if you have a high school student, they don't have professional clothes. So you have to constantly be checking to make sure why you're thinking things, and don't rely on gut instincts so much, because that's where you can really get into trouble.
Well, we try to have multiple people participate in the hiring process, so you get different perspectives. And I also think it's important to ask the same questions of each person. And like in our computer lab, they have a rubric scoring system. So when they answer that question, you assign a point value to it, and then you add up the total score, you know. And that way, the total score may not be the higher, because there's other things you consider as well, but it also helps you just to take that any type of bias out of it.
In a smaller community, many of the people who are applying, we already know. And so you've already had some form of contact with them. One of the things that we kind of have to think about is, and their application may be good, but when it comes down to the end of the day, can I trust this person with the key to the building? And so we try very hard to be fair, and we don't white out anything in our applications. Like I said, most of these people we already know. It's difficult when you have someone who applied who you think might be good, but their roommate has been in trouble for taking keys out of the purse and breaking in someplace. You have to think about that situation too. What other things may happen. So we try to come in and again do the same questions with everybody. I mean, to make it a level playing field at that point. I have had another person in with me when I have interviewed, just to make sure we hear the same thing, and also kind of a little protection for us that someone doesn't come back and say this was an unfair interview. It's really hard to, we all as humans have perceptions of people, and it's really hard. You really have to struggle to get over that sometimes, and that's something we all need to work on, I think.
Yeah, the main thing I was going to say on this question was what Bev already said. If you have multiple people involved in the interview, that can, to some degree at least, help eliminate the unconscious bias. That's the last of the questions that we had prepared. Now we'd be glad to try to answer questions that you may want to pose to us. Yeah, Andrew.
So I realize that not everybody in the world wants to work at the same job for 100 years, like some of us have done. But how much weight do you give to the fact that somebody worked 2 years at this job, and then they worked a year at this job, and then they worked another year at this job, or they work 2 years at this job, and now they want to work at your library.
Okay, I'm
But there
gonna,
doesn't seem to be, they're not being fired from any of these jobs, they're just,
I'm gonna repeat the question just to make sure we have it on the recording. It boils down to someone who has moved from job to job frequently. How much weight do you give that in considering who to hire? Would anyone like to be the first person at least to respond to that?
I look at that, but I don't prevent it from interviewing them. Because today in this world, people job hop a lot, and they are moving up. If they've been 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, that's probably a negative. But if it's been 1 year or 2 years, they may just be moving up in the world.
I would look at that too. Wouldn't prevent me from hiring somebody, but I'd also consider the amount of training we have to do to get that person to work in the library, and if it came down between that and another equally qualified person, I might pick the other person.
I think too, you have to make sure people have different definitions for different words. And when I say part-time, we mean that you're not working every day of the week. I've had people apply for our part-time jobs that assumed it was a temporary job. And they've come in and said, well, I can be here for 3 months. And then, so you need to be really careful that you're on the same page in terms of definitions. I would look to see, if there was an indication of why they had so much. It is, I'm old, and I grew up in the generation, I think, where I know my parents told me, get a job, a good job, and you'll be there the rest of your life. The younger generation, that's not the same situation. Something else that's odd that's happened to us in the hiring process, each of the last 3 times I have set up interviews, I've had one person in each of those 3 times not show and not call, which I'd rather know at that point than, so it's just a different mindset these days of how to approach. I mean, if you've changed your mind, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but call me and let me know. So.
This was alluded to, but maybe not as directly as I'm going to. I think I would take a look at a person who changed jobs a lot and see if it did look like, in fact, they were job advances of some kind, moving up, or and if it wasn't, I would probably be real hesitant on that person. If I thought I still wanted to look at that person, maybe because it seems like other than that fact, they might be the best applicant, I would probably go ahead and call the references at that point and see if I could just get some insight into why they were moving so frequently. And sometimes you can get that. What other questions do we have? Yes?
Who do you use for a background check?
Okay, who do you use for a background check? The only positions we used for a background check up until very recently was our rotation van driver, because they go out with the keys to all the libraries. And our police department just did that for us. Didn't cost us anything. Last year, I started doing, when we became a passport acceptance facility, I decided I needed to get a background check because of the things I was required to certify as a facility manager for them, that I want a background check before I was comfortable saying I knew this about them. And so, gosh, frankly, I don't remember the name of the company that I use it. I've got the name in my file so I can use it on future hires, but I just don't remember now. What about you? I know you mentioned.
Well, ours is handled by our city HR department, so I could find out for you and give you that recommendation, but, I personally don't do it, so.
And I'm like Rogers, mine's at home in the file because we don't have to use it all that often. I contacted the school system and we use the same agency that they do, and they're based out of Wichita. So if you want me to send that to you, I can, Sammy. Excuse me. They also do varying levels. You can do a pretty basic, or you can keep adding things that they look for and timeframes and things. So it can vary quite a bit in what you can find out.
All right, any other questions?
How expensive are background checks?
Oh, the question is how expensive are background checks? And I was actually thinking $60 is what we pay. 60 or 70?
For like a basic.
Yeah. There are different levels you can get.
You only do the people that are going to be working with children.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
teens and
that's the only one.
children.
Yeah, that's it. So I've only done one, $60.
Okay. What other questions?
I have an interview tomorrow afternoon. Would you guys want to come and do that for me?
No. Anyone else? All right. Is there anything else anyone on the panel would like to say?
If any of you have any questions, my address is jeri@iplks.org. Just shoot me an email and I'd be happy to help you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you to Jeri Kay and Bev and Connie. We really appreciate people's willingness to step up and participate in something like this. So, thank you very much.